All right, thank you everyone, and great to see everyone. Let's continue on our Dao De Jing reading, and today we will focus on chapter 79. Oh, I'm sorry, chapter 78 and chapter 79. Okay, so let's start it. Anyone want to read your translation on chapter 78? Please raise your hand. Oh, okay, Joe and Kwang.
Okay, this is the Derek Lin translation. Nothing in the world is softer or weaker than water, yet nothing is better at overcoming the hard and strong. This is because nothing can replace it. That the weak overcomes the strong and the soft overcomes the hard, everybody in the world knows, but cannot put into practice. Therefore, sages say, the one who accepts the humiliation of the state is called its master. The one who accepts the misfortune of the state becomes king of the world. The truth seems like the opposite.
Thank you, Joe. Kwang, please.
Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, Standard 78. What more gentle in this world than water? Yet nothing better conquers hard and strong. What else could take its place? Gentle conquers strong and tender hard. Well known as this is to all the world, who has proven able to apply it. Wiser men accordingly have said, he who for the kingdom's sake bears shame earns the name master of the shrine. He who for the kingdom bears ill fortune earns the name of king of all
You have
the
no
world.
last.
True words of truth appear to be.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So the last line is how untrue words of truth appear to be.
Oh, okay, got you. Yeah, thank you. Anyone want to read other version? Kitty, please.
Sure. Jia Fu Feng. Under heaven, nothing is more soft and yielding than water. Yet for attacking the solid and strong, nothing is better. It has no equal. The weak can overcome the strong. The supple can overcome the stiff. Under heaven, everyone knows this, yet no one puts it into practice. Therefore, the sage says, he who takes upon himself the humiliation of the people is fit to rule them. He who takes upon himself the country's disasters deserves to be kings of the universe. The truth often sounds paradoxical.
Thank you, Kitty. So let me share my screen.
And I'll read from my copy.
Okay,
Chapter 78, the De of water. Nothing in the world is more tender nor soft than water, but nothing attacks what is hard and strong better than water does. There's nothing that can replace water. Tenderness can overcome strength. Softness can overcome hardness. Nobody in the world doesn't know this, yet nobody acts on this. Therefore, the sage said, those who receive the disgrace of the state can be the lord of the country, altars of grain and earth and grain. Those who receive the misfortune of the state can be the king of the world. These true words may sound paradoxical.
Sorry, let me close the window. All right, thank you, Aman. Yes, this one I think is similar to chapter, is that chapter 8, talking about the water. So the De of water. Okay. So here I deal with some translation. I think that's two words opposite, right? So deal with 柔弱. Okay. So I translate the first word 柔. Let me make it big. Okay. The first word is tender. Tender and soft. Okay. So the tender one can overcome the strength. The softness can overcome the hardness. Okay. So there's many different translation, but in general, it's talking about the tender versus strength, strong, soft versus hard. Okay. And it's paradoxical because in general, we will believe the strong one will overcome the tender one. The hard one will overcome the soft one. But here, Laozi tried to tell us it's different than you are thinking. And then he gives the example is water. So that's on the first part, right? He talking about, look at the water. It's the most tender and the most soft, okay? But it can overcome many things. And I think he may talking about the water erosion and our terrain usually being shaped by water. So that's the natural phenomenon. Then from the natural phenomenon, he tried to draw some kind of life lesson or kind of metaphysics, talking about the tenderness can overcome the strength, the softness can overcome the hardness. Nobody in the world doesn't know this. Okay, everybody know this, but nobody doing this way. Then finally, he bring the sage, and here is the key, is talking about his political view. Is talking about, look at the water, right? He used the word "go," this word. That means the dirty place. And I translate as disgrace. Basically, he's talking about receive the disgrace or stay in the dirty place. You can be the lord of the country. You receive the misfortune. Okay, he talking about 不祥. Okay, then you can be the king of the world. Just opposite. Instead of in common sense, we may believe the king or the leader should be honor and fortune. He talking about he should receive the dirty praise or disgrace and receive the misfortune. Then he can be the leader, the Lord, or the king of the world. So that's the teaching. So he said, okay, the author said, the true word may sound paradoxical. So that's the teaching on this chapter. Among, yeah.
Thank you, Jason. I like the last 4 chapters of the Tao Te Ching a lot. I'm a fan. But I like this because it is a good reiteration of some of the most quintessential lessons Lao Tzu is attempting to teach his pupil. And this text is attempting to teach us, the reader, to embrace paradox is a fundamental lesson of Taoist teachings. And this is an example of that paradox, where he talks about what is tender and soft and how it overcomes strength and hardness. When people ask the question, and this has come up in the meeting a few times, I thought Taoism was a pacifist philosophy or a pacifist religion. Here's the answer. No, it's not pacifistic. It is soft. It is yielding. It has learned the lessons of giving ground and taking on disgrace, not fighting for honor, not, engaging in trying to be recognized as the Lord of the kingdom or the land or the big boss, big man on campus, big fish in the pond, whatever your metaphor. Those kind of adolescent aspirations have to be let go of to actually really understand how this paradox works. Why is it that water is so soft, so yielding, yet not passive? Think of the utility of water. Think of what water can do. I actually was toying with this passage just the other day in my mind as I had my umbrella out in June in this state, and watching the water just dump out of the sky was an active thing. It's not passive. That water is definitely mobilizing stuff, doing things. I am sitting with an umbrella, and the water indifferently will soak the umbrella as much as me. Whether or not I put it up or I don't, I still have the potential to be just as wet based on my own actions. Water continues to do what it's going to do. So this idea of soft, yielding persistence and driven focus are baked into the cake. And that's part of the paradox, is to be yielding but not lose focus, giving and tender but not simply to succumb. That is the duh of water that this chapter is discussing.
All right, thank you, Aman. Right now, let's discuss this chapter. If you have a question or something you learn from this chapter, please raise your hand. And then, Madeline, please.
Yes, hi. Thanks, you guys. Another wonderful translation. I have two questions about the translation. One was that first word, that word in the first line, tender, that Jason, you said you translated as tender. I'm wondering what the literal word meant or what the connotation might be. And the other is a question about the one of the last lines.
Okay, so thank you. I really appreciate this kind of question or challenge. Okay, so okay, another thing I try to make sure consistent on all the chapter. So I think in previous I already make decision. I'm going to translate this word as tender, which usually used as opposite of strong. So a lot of translation I heard use weakness, as use weakness. But if weak overcomes strong, to me I think it's a little bit difficult to get it. But I think tender, and another better word I will consider as flexible, because this word, okay, let me make it larger. If you know this word, they have the wood on the bottom. So basically talking about like willow stick, okay, so it's soft, okay, but flexible. I think that's what it means. Second word means raw, okay, in general translate as weak, which is opposite to hard. So I think if we have to be, the words opposite to hard should not be weak, should be soft. That's why I translate this word as soft. Okay, so that's the word choice, and then that's my reason to choose tender and soft. One is for this chapter, and I also try to be consistent with other chapter. That's why I choose this one. The last sentence, 正言若反, that's the one Madeline is asking. So if I want to translate word by word, that means the right words. Okay, 正 means the right, the correct words. Similarly or like reversed, it's opposite. So I don't know what would be best way to translate to English. Okay, if I want to make try to make the English sentence sensible. So that's why I translate as these two words may sound paradoxical. Okay, paradoxical basically I use for 弱反, similarly reversed. So that's the reason. And then I hope I answer your question, Madam.
Yes, thanks. That explanation of tender was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So there are many different translations, but that's my words choice.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Okay.
And then my other question was actually about the altars of earth and salt.
Okay. Yeah.
Are those altars that will be made to the Lord of the country? And are they good? Like, I know salt is valuable, and so is earth, but salted earth is a terrible thing. It's down, it's right after there, therefore the sage said.
Yeah, I know this one. Yeah. Altar and the earth. Okay. Let me make
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this word, okay, in this case, okay, I will care less about the word itself. Okay, I will not treat this word 设计 as tender and soft. I will treat this word 设计 actually means the altar of the earth and the ground. Okay, 祭 means the ground, right? And the ser means the earth, the altar of earth. So that means you can see the traditional agricultural society, you will set up an altar on earth, which the purpose is to worship or hope we will have a good crop, okay, the grain, okay. So who is the person who become the master to host this altar? That must be the lord of the country. So this word 设计 become a common word as the country, the head of state. So I will care less about the original meaning because it has become a package. So that's the reason, I probably will not focus much on the earth and the ground. I will direct translate as the head of the state, something like this.
I wanted to add to that because I think it's a good question, and Jason's explanation is absolutely accurate. You can kind of think of that altar as the Western equivalent of what would be known later as the town center. It's the origin point or the central point of the town, the person with rights to actually do anything at that altar is the chief of that clan later, that king later. So it becomes sort of almost a euphemism of the person in charge and an actual place. And you can actually go to cities in China today and find often temples built up around what was many centuries ago that village's altar of earth and grain. Usually not a temple that you would know that necessarily, but they might refer to it as the city's temple. And that's why it's sort of got that synonymous idea with town center.
All right, thank you, Aman. Mark, please.
Thanks. Great to see everybody again. Just a point of clarification about what Madeline was asking me about. are there two different words that occur in the first line? It's not just one word. I know in the 8 translations from Boston University, there was only one of those that only gave one word. So it's 2 characters.
Excuse me, I'm not sure your question. Which word?
Soft and tender.
Oh, soft and tender is 2 words. 2 words. Soft and tender, raw and raw. Okay, so they use 2 words, and
Right, and
they mention about its opposite. Okay.
So my 2 questions about this passage are, one, what is the role of time? Because when we think of water wearing away the earth, it takes a long time. So he says that nobody in the world doesn't know this, or everybody does know it. There's a double negative.
Yeah.
And he's veering into logic here. So is there an aspect of time that we have to understand according to which we can act on this? And then the last question was about the logic of the last line. These true words may sound paradoxical. So we have truth contrasted with paradox, when often we have truth contrasted with falsity. But it's interesting that it is truth versus paradox in this case.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, so I got your question. Yeah. First, okay, Amang or Kwang or anyone may disagree, but I would say there's no time here. Didn't mention about time. Okay, so that's first thing, because I don't see any word to talk about time. Okay, so the second question, that's a good question, because the Chinese word only said 正言若反. Okay, right word sounds like reverse. Okay, so that's what it meant, and I just have to find a logical meaning of the English sentence to translate this one. And then I think in the daily life, we may see a lot of ironical things, right? The David, okay, King David, the small kids can kill the giant, okay? So a lot of reverse situation, surprise. So I think it's not take as a strong logic like, okay, the weak one must win, okay, the soft one must win. No, it's not talking about. It's talking about seemingly reversed. Okay, so that's what I understand.
So why is it that no one is acting on this knowledge?
No one is acting on that. Yes, no one is acting. Well, I should not say no one, right? It's wrong, right? Somebody, at least the Taoist expert, will act on that. But since that's the teacher, I think, I know Amang probably will know, when the teacher want to teach something, will say, nobody listen to me. But actually, at least there are 1 or 2 students are listening. So that's what I thought, and the very rhetorical, that's put this way, that's the truth. Nobody understand, but actually, it's not. They at least have some people understand.
Okay, so one last thing I'll sneak in. How are the 2 I don't want to call them sins, but in the last 2 lines, one is referring to the disgrace and one to the misfortune.
Yeah.
The second one sounds like the buck stops here. You have to take responsibility for the misfortune. And is the disgrace more of a ritual or religious nature than the misfortune?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I believe everyone could have a different answer, and then you probably can have your own answer, your answer, right? So basically, remember the last word, right? The right words, the true words may sound paradoxical. Most of people will say, if you are the leader of the state, you should be honored. You should be the most fortunate one, most lucky one. But in fact, you should receive the disgrace, or you should state in the dirty place. In the right Chinese word, they use the word "go." Okay, "go" means the dirty. If you don't wash your hand will have a lot of something called "go." Okay, that means the dirty things. You should, just like water. Okay, water going down usually is a dirty place. So as a leader, you should not, at least that would be my interpretation. As a leader, you should not care about your reputation. You should not care you are lucky or not lucky. Okay, and all the dirty thing, I will do it. Nobody want to do it, I will do it. Okay, that's what I learned from this one actually in my life. Okay, if I have a chance to lead a group, do something nobody want to do, something people think is disgusting, I will do it. Okay, so that's what I learned from this one. Yeah, but you could have a different understanding. That's fine. Okay, thank you for a lot of good question. Juan, please. Or Amang, you have something to add on? No? Okay. Juan,
Actually, I would just add that time is not mentioned. It might be implicit in that if we observe water, we see that it is a function that happens over time. And the literal wording in there is dirty place, or as Jason translates it, I think disgrace fits well. And no fortune, which you could just translate as misfortune.
thank you, Amang. Juan, thank you for waiting.
Oh, that's okay. So I would like to say three things. First, about the Shi Ji. Okay, because Shi Ji means the ontour of the land, of the sowing, and of the harvest of the grain. And if you look at the traditional graph for country Guo, you have a big rectangle outside, but inside the rectangle, you have a small square with a short horizontal line. Okay, and that small square with the short horizontal line represent the Shi Ji. And on the right side, inside the big rectangle, you have a ge, meaning a kind of spear, right? So it's the spear, the weapons protecting the Shi Ji, the ontour of the grain and of the land. In remote antiquity, you don't have to imagine something very complex, okay? It's simply a box with a piece of land of that country. That's why you have the square and with a very short line under the square. That being said, I would like to read, because the last four stanzas of poem 78, 79, 80, 81, for me, it's a very paradoxical, precisely, union of what I would call Taoism and Confucianism, because you have not very stark opposition between the two perspectives, precisely. Okay, I think that Professor Robert Morse is quite brilliant in his comment of all those, but I wouldn't just read his comment for the stanza 78 first. So, distinguishing master of the shrine, so master of the ontour of the sowing and of the grain, from king of all the world, Cooley suggests that the former is likely to refer to the ruler of a kingdom, as all of us said in the last 15 minutes. The latter to the son of heaven of the royal Chou court, that is the universal sovereign. Cooley cites the Zuo Chuan, which is a history, a narrative of China, text under the year 594 BCE, which says, as streams and marshes contain filth and hilly woods harbor deadly beasts and fine stones have hidden flaws, so the Lord of the kingdom carries detritus or rubbish, okay? The dirty things that Jason referred to. Modern scholar Cao Heng suggests a link between this stanza and Analects 20.1, in which the ruler says, if I have personally committed an offense, my domains are not responsible. If somewhere in my domains an offense is committed, the blames rest with us. Here you have to understand us as a us of majesty and not of us of plural. So here you see the Tao Te Ching is a Taoist text, but here you see that there is a clear reference to the king of the kingdom or to the universal sovereign to be responsible for the group, which is a very Confucianist concept. And that's why I said many times that the so-called opposition between Taoism and Confucianism is not so stark if we take the epistemological perspective, or I would say the epistemo-ethical behavioral perspective, especially when it is about the ruling class. I stopped here.
Kwang, excuse me, you talk about this one is related to book 20?
20.1.
I took that note. I took that note.
20. Okay.
Gao Hong, you said, was the one who
Gao Hong.
likens this to the Analects book 20.1.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the quote is very Confucianist. Okay, that mentality that the people at the top are ultimately responsible.
Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I want to follow up on Mark's question. First make a short comment on the last sentence. This last sentence, the true word paradoxical. My translation actually has straight word. So the Chinese character for zheng is interpreted as straight word, not necessarily true, but straight. So in that sense, it's easier to reconcile with the notion of paradoxical meaning of straight word. But the bigger point mentioned by Mark is why don't people put in practice what they know as true? And this is one of the very, very interesting point picked up by later day Neo-Confucianism. In the early 16th century, a school of Neo-Confucianism picked on this point, very point, that the divergence between our knowledge and our action, and how to make consistent our knowledge and our action. And this school of thought picked up on this and prospered and influenced a lot of later thinking. But the major point is that is the realization that a lot of times by knowing something is not sufficient. It's really the conduct, the behavior, the action that really manifests your knowledge or not. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, I agree with you on the translation. I translate as true word, and actually, yeah, you can say it's a straight word, okay, because 正 also means straight, true, right, okay, so there's many meanings. I just have to choose one, and the straight word maybe or a good one, a good word, a good translation, because when you yeah, I think that's another way to think about it. So it's, and another thing when Nick mentioned about the knowing and the action, my understanding is Chinese separate the knowing and the acting, okay, until Nick mentioned about in this which century, 16th, 17th century, Wang Yangmin, okay, he talking about action, and knowing and the action is one, okay, so that's the later story. Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for mentioning this. Joe, please.
Okay, my struggle here. Water, soft and tender. Does it also have to contain the strong in order to overcome the strong as well?
Maybe. Yeah, probably have the strong inside the weak, right? Or tender, right? Have the strong point on that. We don't know, that's a metaphysical question.
Okay.
I would actually look to like current and think of how much power can exist in something like that. Not the
Yeah.
same as strong if you're thinking of like a city wall or a bodybuilder or, a tank. It's not that strength, but it is power. And it does have this sort of gentle insistence.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, another way to think about is like the worst, if it's in Japan, the worst situation could be tsunami, okay, it caused by water, okay, so we see water is soft and tender, but the big destruction force is tsunami, which is water. So, Kwang, please.
Yes, I would like to just remind everyone that Tao Te Ching is most of the time translated as, in English, the book of the way of virtue, or the book of the way and powers. Okay, so and it's true that the distinction between strength and power is just perfect. Okay, because strength most of the time is a word that would evoke brutality, and power is something that is much more encompassing, meaning the capacity to do things or to influence people. Okay, and it is not through brutality most of the time that we can make things done or to influence people. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. Yeah, I think if we translate the Dao De Jing as the way of power or something like this, you will make a best-sell book or something, best-selling book. Okay, so if there's no more comment, then we are going to move to 79. Okay, please raise your hand if you want to read your translation. Kwang, please.
Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 79. When great wrongs resolved leave further wrongs behind, what good will come of that? When wise men hold the left half-thorny pledge, they do not press their debtors for their debts. Men of virtue hold the tally pledge. Men lacking virtue work pursuing claims. Heaven's way does not show kingship favor, but rather joins with good and decent men.
Thank you, Kwang. Any other version or anyone want to read different translation? No?
And we can go to our, oh,
Well, yeah, actually, I really like to hear some
I'll,
other
I'll,
translation.
I'll read one.
Yeah,
Joe.
please.
Joe will read one.
Yeah, Joe, please.
Okay. After, Derek Lynn again, sorry. After settling a great dispute, there must be remaining resentments. How can this be considered good? Therefore, the sage holds the left part of the contract, but does not demand payment from the other person. Those who have virtue hold the contract. Those without virtue hold the collections. The heavenly Tao has no favorites. It constantly gives to the kind people.
Thank you. Joey, please.
Okay, the 79, when bitter enemies make peace, surely some bitterness remain. How can this be solved? Therefore, the sage honors his part of the settlement, but does not exact this due from others. The virtuous carry out the settlement, but those without virtue pursue their plans. Heaven's way give no favors. It always remains with good people. Do good deeds, blame no one. Trying to neutralize a wrong with another wrong will never work, because there is bound to be some wrong left over. To return grievance or wrong with benevolence is the way to absolve a grievance. The sage only sees to it that what is agreed is carried out. He will not lay the blame on anyone. The virtuous one only enforces contracts. The non-virtuous one imposes his will. The way of heaven will not favor anyone in particular, but it will favor those who do good deeds. This is translated by Lok Sang Hok 2002, chapter 79.
Thank you, Joey. You not only read the translation, also read the explanation, I think.
Mark, did you say you wanted to read?
No, I'll hold off. I think we got some good ones.
Okay, so let me see here.
I'll read from my copy, and Jason's going to share his.
79. Okay.
Contract receipt. After harmonizing, settling a major complaint, there must be remaining complaints. How can this be good? Therefore, the sage holds the left creditor's side of the contract, but doesn't demand payment. Those with the keep loan contracts. Those without the collect tax payments. The Tao of heaven is impartial. However, it is usually with good people.
Thank you, Amam. Yeah, I think this one a little bit difficult by the if you read the Chinese word. The key is here, 左气, okay, and the title also called 左气. 气 means contract, 左 means left. So the custom is you write a contract, usually it's a loan. So you tier, I believe it tier is a two part, and on the left part is holding by the creditor. So you use this left part to request the money. So I think that's the background of the situation. So here at the beginning, harmonizing a major complaint. Okay, some translation called dispute, that's the yuan. Okay, again, I translate all the yuan as complaint. Okay, so so settle the complaint or dispute, okay, by harmonizing. Harmonize is not enough because according to the author, you harmonize it, you still have something left. So that means negotiating, try to do, it's not the right way to do. So that's why the author brings sage. So the sage hold the left side of the contract, 左气, okay, doesn't demand because he hold the contract but doesn't to demand the payment. Okay, so he talking about the person with the will keep the contract or will 有德司气. Okay, means if the person have the 德 will hold the contract, but the person without 德 will 失策. Okay, this words means the 10% tax. Okay, so in here means will request for the money. So here the final talking about the Tao of heaven is impartial, 无亲 or no favor. It all usually with the good people. So the lesson here, at least for me, is talking about harmonizing is not enough, okay? Because if you have a complaint, you have the dispute, you harmonize it is not the right way to do. And what the author wants you to do is forgiving, because you harmonize, you still have something left. And the sage will not request the payment. I think it means forgive the law, forgive the payment. So that's the right way to do. So that's what my understanding about this chapter. So that's it. Amang, please.
I was actually trying to look up a good photo to drop into the chat of one of these Zhou Dynasty sort of contracts. It would have been quite a thing because most of them would have been written on bamboo slips or silk slips. They wouldn't have paper necessarily. And one of the things that was really telling is that the creditor, you typically would have a seal or a chop that they would stamp the contract with, and that's where it was broken. So the person who has that part of the contract always has proof that is my debt to collect. The advice here is very interesting because he's saying you want to be the one with the right to collect the debt. You just should never do it. And that's, again, this idea of potential power, this buildup of potentiality. If people are in your debt, but you're never collecting on that debt, those people remain in your debt. This is almost Machiavellian to a degree. Keep people indebted to you, never knowing if you're going to call the loan due. That is one way it could actually be interpreted. But what the actual advice in here is that people with people with real power, people with real virtue, keep those contracts. They never go seek to collect. They just hoard them. I guess the equivalency, I can think of an example in the modern era where I can't remember who the person was that purchased up bundled credit medical debt, because that is something that is now very common in the modern marketplace, is to bundle things like medical debts into batches that are then auctioned or sold so that collectors can purchase that batch and then they can go after those debts. And as it's sold and sold again, it's a question of how likely do they think they are to actually be able to reclaim it. Some talk show host, some person bought a clutch of these and forgave them. That was the philanthropic action of this person. And it did show a real power to undermine the entire system, to say, you keep buying these, but collecting them is a choice. You don't actually have to do that. And in fact, if you stop doing that, you probably would be better off, and our economy would be better off. I think this was shortly after the 2008 crash in the subprime mortgage, and it was another example of another bundled loan or load of debt batches. Why is this the way to do things? Well, because the Tao of Heaven is like this. It collects, debts are owed to it. Everybody in existence owes their life to this plane of existence that we live on, but it never claims, okay, you need to pay back now. We can or we can't. It is impartial to our actions, to whether it's paid back or not by us. And usually because its ability to give so abundantly, it tends to be with the better people. And I do approve here of Jason's use of usually for the term chang, because it is a good way of hedging your bet. This is Taoism or Taoist text not making a truth claim. It's making a truth generalization with a margin of error and wiggle room for sometimes it's really nice to the terrible people too, and there's just nothing you can really do about it. That's how it is. But generally, it will be with people who are more decent. And we can kind of see that, the stories of people who make every wrong choice in life and yet still thrive are the exception. The rule generally is people who try and do right generally get commensurate reward. Though I will very well acknowledge that's not an absolute. I'm just averaging over time. Yeah, keep the left-hand side of the contract. The left.
Thank you, Amam. So that's give some time to discuss or ask your question. We have a Donna, please.
Okay, so my question is, especially after having so many comments plus the last one, it sounds like benevolence carrying weight, carrying empowerment, and the heavens, are impartial to both sides, but might weigh more on the side of a kind, good soul. But is benevolence akin then to that soft water or the gentleness carrying power?
So your question is about benevolence. Am I right?
Yes. And I think that was in one of the translations. Joy, I forget who.
Is there has a benevolence here in this chapter?
As
I don't see
in,
it.
I'm sorry.
At least I don't see any word could be possibly translated as benevolent.
Did Joy read something? And then there was that in her, was it Joy?
When Joey reads,
Yeah, I thought I heard that word.
Yeah, you can say it, okay. The reason let's say I forgive the loan, okay, I forgive the payment because I'm benevolent, okay, so I forgive. Yeah, you can explain in this way, but on the text, there's nothing to say about benevolence. Let's put it away.
So it might not really be that graciousness or forgiveness still holding the power because they owe you because you forgave them or you let them go of their debt. But that's not necessarily.
That's not necessary for whatever
Uh-huh.
reason. Okay, so I may hold you hostage. Let's put it this way. I forgive. I didn't request it. Let's say, assume you owe me money, and that I didn't request the payment. I may not have just benevolence. I may have the bad intention, right? I want to hold you, okay, hostage, so I can. So at least the text didn't say anything. Okay, if you just read this one, and of course, benevolence is one of the reasons, and then I could be be generous, okay, and then I don't want to cause any trouble. But I would tend to interpret this one is because this chapter start with complaint, yuan, right? The purpose is to resolve the complaint, the dispute. So I will take the word contract or payment as metaphor, because let's say we have some disagreement. The best way is forgiving. I will take this way, but since that's a text without any background, anything, you can have your own interpretation.
I see.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, so Madeline, please.
Yeah, thanks. Well, this is a beautiful one. It would never occurred to me that there was a Machiavellian aspect to it. I was seeing it really more kind of in Kantian terms, really. You know what the right thing to do is. You go ahead and do that. Don't be like the tax collector running around hectoring people about everything, trying to get them to do the right thing. You just do it. And the people you've made an agreement with, whether it's tacit or explicit, whether it's about trust or money or meeting someone somewhere on time, whatever it is, they know what their side of things is. They hold the other half of that contract, and it's up to them to fulfill it.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. Yeah, and then if you read, or if I don't have a chance to take a close look on Han Feizi, another legalist philosopher. He has his essay has 55, I think it's 55 chapters, and there's two chapters is interpretation Laozi. Okay, so his interpretation of Laozi is very Machiavellian style. Okay, so you can read in this way. Okay, it's not unusual to, well, I would say, if you want to read the Machiavellian way, you can read this way. Okay, so that's common. Let's put it this way. Second thing I want to talk about is, at least that's my understanding on this chapter. I'm thinking just opposite than legalism. I'm thinking about is the author is talking about to resolve or to have a good society is not using reward and the punishment, is forgiving is the best way to do. That's what I read. It could be totally different than Machiavellian way to read it, but I read it is forgiving. If you can forgive is the best way. Reward and the punishment is not the right way. That's what I see on this one. Kwang, please.
I would say that with all the 81 stanzas of the Tao Te Ching, you can have a Machiavellian reading if you limit yourself to the lower trigram, or you can have a higher reading if you go to the upper trigram. Okay, once again, my beloved hexagram, line 1, 2, 3, the lower trigram, lines 4, 5, 6, the upper trigram. The Machiavellian approach or reading of each stanza is about what I would call the skillful statesman, okay, or the skillful person simply in relation with the others. He doesn't have to be a ruler or a statesman. There is a lot of stories during the time of Confucius and before, a little bit after, of feudal lords that would burn those debt contracts precisely in order to gain the respect and the gratefulness of people. And in those stories, later on, most of the time, that feudal lord would need the help of those people he has forgiven the debts before, and those people would help him or them. One famous example that I'm sure that Jason knows is Meng Chang Jun, okay, the lord of Meng Chang, and there are a lot more lords of that period, of the warring state period, having that Machiavellian approach precisely, okay, that I would call line 3, which is the highest of the animal kingdom or of the lower trigram. But someone can, of course, forgive the debts or forgive anything in relation of the fact that person has a higher epistemological development and has a good heart. And precisely, it's about the first 2 lines of the stanza. When great wrongs resolve, leave further wrongs behind. What good would come of that? In the sense that if you try to resolve something and you did not manage to achieve perfect justice, and which is most of the cases, it's very difficult to achieve perfect justice in a quarrel, well, you will leave scar, a psychological scar on the side of people who which felt that they did not receive a perfect and fair judgment. And it would bring on, okay? And once again, I want to show very clearly the ideal of Taoism, meaning the highest epistemological development, and also the preoccupation of Confucianism, meaning how to rule in a practical way the state. Because let's not forget that during that time, you have feudal lords fighting with each other. And in a feudal organization of the state, let's not forget that honor and pride played a very big role, okay? And with honor and pride, there is a lot of revenge in the story of ancient China. If you read ancient Chinese history, you will see that most of the time is one revenge after the other, and etc., etc. So here, the aristocratic society of the time is so codified by honor and pride that in order to reduce that series of revenge, the Taoist masters would invite those aristocrats to a more forgiving attitude precisely. And not only from a Machiavellian perspective, but from a higher epistemological perspective. But I would push my reasoning as far as to say that even if they apply the advice only from a Machiavellian perspective, it's already a big improvement compared to the series of revenge that characterize the history of ancient China. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. We have Paul, please.
Hi. If you take the world of patents, I think there's a parallel in that companies will go crazy getting patents, but they then have cards that they could play if somebody tried to sue them, but they don't do any aggressive pursuing other people who might be violating the patents, which I think is sort of in the middle of what you guys are talking about. You still got power, but just having these cards keeps people from attacking you. So it's just another view add. And that isn't Machiavellian at all. So just a thought.
Thank you, Paul, to share this one. And I really think about the situation is a lot of, I think it's Google, right? A lot of time they did abandon their copyright. And I think that probably the way to do it. But again, there's many ways to interpret this chapter. Amang, you have something to say, please.
Oh no, I was gonna wait in the order. Let
Okay,
others
so
speak
let's
first.
go from Madeline, Huang, and Amang. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if you know, at the time these contracts were written, would they have been written from right to left or from top to bottom?
Oh, for sure, it's top to bottom, from the right to left. Okay, so
Okay, thanks.
okay, there's no doubt about it. So
Actually, I want to tackle that just a little bit. So something like what I'm wearing around my necklace would be a tally that a merchant might use, where the contract was written down it would be stamped with a chop, and then you can see just how I would break it and hand it off. This is why the left-hand side is what remains with the creditor.
thank you, Amang. Kwang, please.
Yes, I just want to say that maybe there's another way to say Machiavellian, okay? Because the word Machiavellian in English suppose an evil intention, okay? But you can be skillful without being Machiavellian, okay? I would suggest that someone could act out of compassion or of pure awareness. That is the best, of course. But you can act out of being skillful, meaning that you don't want to make things worse, but you don't necessarily have evil intentions. And I would say that to be skillful is a kind of human possibility, human possible achievement compared to the perfect shining forth of absolute awareness, which is a much higher epistemological development, but which is not evil, because if you're skillful, you don't want to make things worse. It doesn't mean that you are evil. I stop here.
Yeah,
I
thank
really
you.
enjoy. I'm really enjoying this. And I'm sorry I opened this can of worms by bringing up the very Machiavellian reading of this chapter. Potentially, there are absolutely more benevolent ways to understand this chapter. And even though the term benevolence isn't used directly, there is a sense of benevolence if you are collecting from, if you're giving to other people. First of all, you have to have been giving to them for them to owe you something. And then you're never collecting on what they owe you. That is an act of benevolence. I wanted to introduce one practical version of this that actually shows up in Tai Chi practice in a term called Chi Chu, which I'm dropping into the chat there. Chi Chu literally translates to eat loss. And this is a term that you'll see in Tai Chi from Tai Chi practitioners and sometimes from Chinese medical practitioners. It's interpreted to invest in loss. And that is something that confounds a lot of early practitioners. The way I like to kind of explain it or think of it, when you do Tai Chi, you do the same slow, stupid movement again and again and again. and you do it repetitively, and you do it slowly, and you do it thoughtfully. And then after the 10,000th time you've done it, you're not thinking about, am I doing this right? In fact, you're thinking less and less about it. You are investing in losing your investment in it, your time consumption to it. That has many implications. The example I give to people here in a Western society, most of us learn to drive a car. And if we learn to drive a car, we started doing it with a white monkey knuckle death grip, able to see 2 feet off our bumper, sweating cold bullets in every car passing way too fast by us. But we did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again. And by the 12,000th time we are in the car, we're not at 10 and 2. We may have a hand on the wheel. We're not staring 2 feet off our bumper. We can look a mile up the road, or we could sit and, look at our phone while we shouldn't be. If we don't have music playing, someone to talk to, the window down, some additional stimulation, what we have lost, the investment we have put here has lost us so much from the anxiety of the exercise that we can zone out into highway hypnosis. That's a known thing. Investing in loss, eating the losses, is something that is a paradox. How am I getting better by doing less of something? But that is also what this chapter is advising. You're getting better at being a resolver of conflict by letting go of whether you are right or not, rather letting go of whether you are owed or not, and investing in the loss that you will have for not being right, not being given what you're owed, for a greater good, which is real harmony, not having someone leave a conflict with sour persimmons. So, Chichu.
Thank you, Abam. Joe and Joe, please.
Problem I'm having, if the intent is benevolence, why would you do a contract in the first place? If there wasn't something in that intent of having something over somebody, so that in the future, they always feel that. Yeah.
I'll tackle that.
Okay.
It is not do a contract to resolve conflict. It says when there's conflict and you walk away from it, there's bound to be some leftover hurt feelings. But if you were to invest in the loss, if you looked at the person you were in conflict with and you said, you know what, you're absolutely right. Everything you're saying is correct. Here, let me go ahead and give you my wallet. You go ahead and have a good day. You've invested in a lot of loss, but that person feels like they've received everything they could ever want. And you're not sparking any further outrage. He uses the metaphor of a contract because this is something I don't know of anyone else, but it always harbors some hurt feelings that I still owe my mortgage company anything, or that I have to pay, for this internet quality, or those kind of, resentments exist for just about everybody. Imagine a jubilee when they said, you know what, no taxes this year. No, that was an occasion where everyone went, hallelujah. And they didn't question whether it was right, whether it was good for the kingdom, whether they simply took it as a good thing. So when you are in that position of power and you can be the one to offer me quicker internet, if instead you just go ahead and charge me what I'm already paying, I'm going to hate you a lot less than if it's just going to be a little bit more. And by the way, don't you dare ever be late on a payment.
Thank you, Amam. Yeah, let's go from Joy, please.
Yes, I think this sentence of 79, especially on benevolence, I think it's very important in this this chapter because there's a two word that he say, 安可以为善. Shan is something is very kind, benevolence. And also at the end is 常与善人. So those is two word is something that you do kind to the other, but in fact is kind to yourself too. And it's very important, but most important thing, I think, forgiving is one thing, but you are not allowed the wrongdoing, keep on doing the wrong thing again and again, or, offend to the other. I don't think that is the right thing because at the end, it say forward, 天道无亲. 天道, that is the way of heaven or the righteous of the justice. There will be no any like mercy or anything that it will have the way that to do the right justice to whoever doing the wrong, whoever doing the right. But I think it's most important for me to my opinion is reminding you don't pay back or the revenge or eye to eye, something that some people doing something wrong or you do the same thing back to the other. That is the kindness to yourself, because sometimes if you do something wrong, you don't have a peace in your heart. And for whoever you own some debt or whoever you do something wrong, you already lost the peace. And you already, lost maybe a lot of good things. So far beyond you know. So I think the benevolence is very, very important in this chapter, and also it's very, very important to ourselves. We choose not to do wrong or pay the revenge or do something really, probably is unkind to the other, but I don't think we allow some people keep on doing the wrong thing repeatedly. That is not acceptable either, because there will be righteous, there will be justice. Because 天道无亲, it won't have anything, for a favor to special someone that you can keep on doing the wrong thing or keep on having the debt or own somebody, doing the wrong thing again and again. I think the benevolence is up to everyone's heart, or unconsciously. What do you think to the other or to yourself will have a peace in the bottom of your heart, and peace with the other, and peace with God too. What I think.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. Okay. You read San as benevolence. Okay. Yeah, that's another way to read it. Okay. Kwang and Nick. Okay, Kwang, please.
Yes, I would like to piggyback Joy too, because Shan can be translated as goodness or kindness. And I want to relate it with the man of virtue hold the tally pledge, man lacking virtue work pursuing claims. So here, I think that precisely the word virtue that can be translated by power, I think that we have to understand it as the power of infinite awareness that would make you capable of letting go. Okay, because many has come back to the fact that it is better in most situations to let go rather than to absolutely want to prove that you were right and you have the right to claim the debts or etc. Right? So that attitude of letting go, but spontaneously, it's because you have that power of infinite awareness that would make you capable of kindness and of goodness. And once again, I want to come back to the epistemological development with the three major timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth. And beauty in Chinese is, of course, Mei, but in the epistemological development, beauty in Chinese is not Mei, it's Yi, meaning justice. So that capacity to embody justice in a specific situation is given by the fact that you have that power that would translate into kindness, and that kindness that would establish justice. Okay, I just want to read it again. Man of virtue, meaning of power, having infinite awareness, hold the tally pledge, meaning they will not claim the debt. And man lacking virtue, work, pursuing claims. So those lacking virtue would go after the other, claiming the debts or claiming to be right. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwam. Yeah, that's kind of the way I translate. So, that's why I didn't translate as a virtue, because it also have the meaning of power. But translate as a power sounds a little bit strange. That's why I decide to keep the original Chinese word 德, which has a different meaning. Again, same as Tao, if I translate as a way, okay, or principle, it's also very too narrow. Let's put it this way. Another thing is about the sun. Okay, Joy kind of want to interpret as kindness, benevolence, which is there's nothing wrong with this way. But my way of translate for the entire Dao De Jing, I always translate sun as a good or goodness, which means general good. Okay, and May Kwang talk about is justice. And in general, I don't translate it as a beautiful. I translate it as a moral good. Okay, so it's close to what Kwang talk about justice, because Chinese word May has, even on the surface, means beautiful, but it has its moral sense, especially in Dao De Jing, because May always opposite to not ugly, opposite to evil. Okay, whenever they talk about May, okay, beautiful, the opposite side is not ugly, it's evil. So in this case, May has its moral meaning, especially in Dao De Jing 81 chapter. Nick and Mark. Nick, please.
Yeah, I just want to comment quickly on amongst reference to eat loss, and clearly that does not make sense in a static setting. But the Chinese thoughts are inherently dynamic in the sense that time dimension is presupposed without mentioning. So life, even generations of life, are repeated games. So in that setting, and with
Sorry, Nick, are you still there? I think we lost you. Okay,
this
so
premise that there is a win
Nick,
and loss. So therefore,
Nick,
sometimes
Nick, can you repeat? Because we didn't hear you for last.
it's okay. I'm on the train, so internet is unstable.
Yeah. Okay. When you get a more stable, then you just raise your hand again. Mark, please.
Okay.
Go ahead with others.
My question was about, okay, can you hear me, Nick?
Yeah, I can hear you. Mark, please.
Okay. In the last line, I think you used the word usually.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at the Boston University, that includes Lao's translation and a bunch of other translations. It's always the word always.
Yeah. I agree. Okay.
So,
yeah. Okay. So
okay.
thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain. Yeah. I do translate this word 长 as usually instead of always. Okay, I have my reason, and I know most could be 99% or 90% of other translation will use always. I look through and then I make a conscious decision to avoid always. Because if you look at this word 长 in Chinese daily use, I think it doesn't mean always, it means usually. Okay, always to me is a higher percent. Always associate with must or associate with some absolute. 长 is more like a daily life. So my reading in Dao De Jing or all the Taoism texts, I read is more on the daily life. I remember Madeline talking about every day. Okay, so something like this. So I do see Tao as an everyday thing. Okay, so I translate 长 this word. Most of the translator will translate as always, but I translate as usually or usual. So yeah, okay, that's I need to explain. Okay, and then of course I'm not sure you always work or not, but so far so good. At least I feel that's a good choice, at least for myself. Amang, I think you had something to say.
I wanted to endorse this because this was a conversation that we had early on. The very opening lines of verse 1, Dao De Ching, Dao Ke Dao Fei Chang Dao, Ming Kang Fei Chang Ming, have been heard 1,000 times by 1,000 different recipients as the Tao can be Taoed, not the permanent Tao or the always Tao or the forever Tao. But this idea of impermanence is something that is quintessential to Taoism, as is the lack of absolutist truth claim. Like I was just saying before, giving yourself that 2% wiggle room. And so I've actually come to see translating, using the interpretation of Chang as usual, or I put into the chat often. It can also mean frequent, everyday, common, general. It's meant to be not elevated into this sort of awe-inspiring great thing. It is meant to be so common, so frequent, so everyday that you don't see it as sort of awe-striking. And you will see that inconsistency in our translation versus many other translations, but it's a very intentional one that I've grown to endorse a great deal because I think it captures some of the most quintessential sentiment of the Tao Te Ching in that simple word choice.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. Yes, and another reason is this. If you look at the 长, this word, it original means something like the clothes, and not really underwear. It's I think it's between the formal dress and the underwear. That's something they call 长. Okay, that's the kind of clothes. I'm not very familiar, but kind of clothes. Okay, you are wearing. I think it's wearing for the dead people. Okay, I'm not very sure, but it's kind of close. So okay, that's the reason. Okay, and of course it's a decision we make. Okay, but I hope it work. But I as I said, I believe so far so good. So okay, so any other comment? Looks like we have no hand. Okay, Madeline, please.
So
In other words, now the opening chapter can be the Tao that can be told is not the usual Tao.
That's right. That's I would do it for the
Very interesting.
yeah, and then of course I'm welcome for any kind of challenge. And then if you feel not right or different, yeah, sometimes I think that's the way, because I don't see Tao as something very high. I see something very common. Okay, I think that's the way I see it.
And Jason,
go ahead.
Yeah. And does that harmonize with the idea from, I think it was the previous chapter, that things are often their opposite? So what is always might be usual, and what is usual might be opposite, might be always, but you never know.
On the previous chapter, that's talk about the right word, or use nick the translation.
Yes.
Straight word. May sounds okay. Paradoxical. So in my understanding, the Taoism in both Zhuangzi and Laozi is not using the word very precise. Okay, they use the word not very loose. Okay, seemingly kind of, this kind of way, not a strong, not a strong, clear-cut word, I should say this way. That's why I will make the words like usually, seemingly, sounds like, maybe, I think that's the tone when I read it. Okay, so that's why I make this kind of translation. And then we have at least 100 different translation. And when Amang and I make this effort, we should be different, right? We cannot be the same as others. I think that's another reason. So, Mark, I believe I answered your question, right?
Oh, yes, very much.
Okay, you may not satisfy, but that's the answer. So, Mandarin, please.
I would just say, as you usually do.
Okay, great. Mandarin, please.
This is just a somewhat darker take on this topic of usually at the end. I mean, in real life, you can consistently do the right thing and forgive other people their debts and do all those things. There's not necessarily any reward whatsoever, except that the knowledge that, you are sticking with your de. You're developing your de. And so this usually or always, or, whatever word it is, seems more like it's in the realm of the advice to the young lordlings, of trying to give them some sense of a material incentive for doing the right thing until they're mature enough to understand that it's worth doing for its own sake.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yeah. Joe, please.
Okay, question for my confusion here. In that last line, always to me implies 100% of the time. Usually, often, frequently doesn't. So is that to suggest that, because my translation says the heavenly Tao has no favorites, it constantly gives to the kind people. So does that imply that sometimes it doesn't?
Yeah,
And why would it not?
I will see this way. You don't see always the good piece, but good person get a good result. Okay, That's the reality. So I
Yeah.
was this way, yeah.
So it doesn't work on a more a higher level of just
At least
satisfaction?
I don't see this way, you know.
I'll
Okay.
put it this way. If you translate this as it's always with the good people, then you run into the problem of theodicy, the problem of evil. Why do kids get cancer? It's inexplicable. And so, again, that hedging your bets, leaving room for the fact that no, sometimes it's not how you prefer it to be. It's not as benevolent as we'd like it to be. But it usually is, because usually that's not what happens to kids. Usually, you know, it's something much more banal, much more just everyday, that they get a chance to, lose their teeth, grow up, learn words. Um, I like I said, I've really come to embrace this translation of chant as often or frequent or usual, as opposed to the absolutist idea that there is an always. As soon as you get into always and never, you're into the concrete thinking that you hear from every 14-year-old when they tell you about their diet, and that they have always liked chicken nuggets, or they've never eaten, ranch with their fries.
So how would the Tao explain the example you gave of the child?
The Odyssey, it doesn't have to, because it doesn't make a claim that there is an omniscient benevolence. It recognizes, in fact, it says the Tao treats like straw dogs. The good and bad alike get rained on. The good and bad alike will suffer drought. It's not going to play favorites necessarily. um, it generally goes better with the people who aren't avarice, aren't greedy, aren't, solipsistic and self-absorbed. That usually is a recipe for disaster. Not always, but usually.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think we will, that's one of the reason, after next week, we read 80 and 81, we will like kind of fast read, okay, from 38 to 81. Each chapter probably take about 10. Let's go through, among and I translated the text. See, is that consistent, or is there any problem or anything? I think that's important. Um, I believe our translation kind of bring the text, the ancient text, down to the earth, become more daily life, less religious, like less absolute, uh, less
Less
serious.
obtuse.
Less serious than this way. Okay, so that's the purpose. Okay, and you may disagree, and probably another 90% of the scholar may not do this way. But as long as this way read makes sense, then it has its own meaning. So that's the purpose. Again, there's another 200 different translation out there. There's no reason we put a lot of effort, and which is consistent with all another 200 versions. So, Madeline, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that last line. Again, now I'm thinking about that heaven, whether it all, let's say usually, often, whatever gives to the virtuous or to the benevolent. I think that we have all been assuming that what the benevolent gives to the person who's in their debt and the type of thing they receive from heaven are the same. But in fact, heaven may be giving them something that is not qualitatively the same as what they are giving to other people?
Okay, I think here is forgive me to be a little bit picky here. Madeline, you mentioned this the last sentence. Okay, it's usually with good people. Okay, so 常与善人. So this word 与 again, you can translate as giving. So the heaven usually reward the good people. But remember, I translate as with. Okay, I have a purpose on that because I read this 与 not as giving. I read it as together. Okay. Accordingly, what's the meaning? Okay, not giving. So I try to avoid like the heaven has reward and the punishment, this kind of concept here. So that's I would like to explain. We have Ella and Mark.
Thank you. Great presentation. And I'm thinking about a follow-up idea to Aman's last statement and the discussion in general here. Okay, so Aman, with your insight that the Tao would have to be ontologically, I'm adding words here, you can switch it if you need to, but I'm summarizing. The Tao cannot be ontologically omniscient. So I get that because that would set up the problem of evil would have to be justified as a part of it. And I think that's what you were saying. So understanding that, and certainly that's, it's difficult. It's difficult for humans to accept because then you acknowledge pain and suffering in the world. However, so I would suppose then the idea is that those who are in alignment with the Tao would therefore create a better world for themselves and other people. And I'm wondering if this is a part of the whole premise. I'll leave it there.
I think you have a excellent grasp of this. I would say that Confucians were better at the other people. Taoists were much better at creating better for themselves. Just classically speaking, it was a philosophy that really lent itself more to the self and cultivating the self, almost independent of what's happening outside of you and other people's machinations and or complaints or issues. You learn to just sort of yield to the slings and arrows of life. And that made most Taoists pretty inoffensive in society, as long as they didn't do things like come down out of the mountains and rent out an entire brothel for the weekend. That happened many times. But yeah, the idea that what is the goal here? If the Tao isn't going to take care of you, it's not, a father figure in the sky that's going to hold your hand. So what is it? It's the omnipresent background substrata of existence and the pattern that works on everything else in the world undeniably that you can only either chafe against or learn to be sensitive to and mold yourself to it as much as possible. Later, culturally, as religious Taoism developed, then the imperative of others actually did come into play, because you had a community then that you were actually engaging with, and it wasn't just about you, it was about also serving that community. But at this level of the text, in these what could almost be called proto-Taoist texts in the Tao Te Ching and even the Chuangzi to a lesser degree, you're really dealing with self-cultivation, self-development with the Tao, not necessarily accounting for everyone else. Like I said, Confucians got that better. They really did with the idea of Ren.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much.
Mark, please.
Madeline drew my attention to the idea that what the wise person gives back to the debtor, or the debt holder gives to the debtor, the debt holder also receives from heaven. And that reminded me of karma. So I'm wondering if there's any hint of karma anywhere.
My answer is no.
It's something that, okay.
My answer is no, but of course you can have a different interpretation, because you probably will see I try very hard to avoid any Buddhism interpretation, okay, in this text. Yeah, we have said there has a lot of similarity from Buddhism thinking, but when I make a translation, I just don't want the word I translate have any Buddhism idea there. But when you read it, you may connect with what you understand about Buddhism. So that's fine, and that's probably the purpose. But I just try very hard to avoid any Buddhism word in the text. Okay.
And I would add, those hints are enough there that my teacher often said, you know, when Taoists met Buddhists, they were talking for 300 years before they went, oh, wait, this isn't just foreign Taoism. There's something else actually happening here. And the Buddhists kind of felt the same way. And when we get to the invention of Chan Buddhists, which later becomes Zen Buddhists, you have what Professor Edward Slingerland refers to as Taoism in Buddhist drag.
Yeah, it's that's perfect right, but the text itself has no. For example, people like to use emptiness to translate the xu. Okay, that's the word. But I don't see that xu is the same as kong. Okay, because they are different. Okay, in Buddhism, talk about emptiness, sunyata. It means it's existential condition. It's empty from the beginning. Taoism talk about xu, which also emptiness, but it means you make it empty, make your mind empty, or you make you unbiased. So you can say they are the same, but as a loyal translator, I have to distinguish. But sometimes I have to agree. I may work too hard and turn out, those, yeah. But I will. That's my effort. Okay, so we have Kwang and.
Okay, so I also want to say that spontaneously I would answer like Jason. Okay, there's nothing to do with Buddhism. However, I would like to add also the following thing. There's a major notion in Buddhism that is very important, that is the law of causality. Okay, and I would say that if you read Taoism, there is something in the background of Taoism that can be called the law of causality, in the sense that if you lack virtue, if you are not capable to know your mind, there will be behaviors with an S that would reflect that relation of cause and effect. Okay, a ignorance of your mind, and I'm sorry, ignorance of your mind sounds so Buddhist, but forget the Buddhist context, okay? Because everyone can say the ignorance of your mind, or the unconsciousness of your mind, or the fact that you don't pay attention to what.
I'm sorry, I need to go, and Kwang, go ahead, continue on that. I agree with you on the causation part, okay, and we probably should have a further discussion on this. Okay, I'm sorry, I have something I need to leave now, and I give the host to Amang, again.
Okay,
I'll
cool.
stick around for about 5. So
Okay, so bye, Jason. So I just want to say that even if in Taoism it has not been conceptualized as the law of cause and effect, or the law of causality, for me, the two perspectives on reality are truly rooted on the notion of the law of causality, as of here.
no, I think, Juan, you're absolutely right. There is so much in terms of similarity of depth of self-exploration. That was probably a good portion of what made for that centuries-long dialogue between Taoist and Buddhist, because you can just imagine, a couple of merchants, and along comes a Buddhist monk. Oh, you meditate like this. Well, we do it like this. And, they had enough common ground. The Confucians hated the Buddhist. They found many things to object to in the Buddhist teaching, starting with cutting their hair and ending with renouncing the family, both anathema to Confucian values. But over centuries, and I mean centuries, these three religious philosophical schools became sort of the touchstones of Chinese culture and society. We're looking at texts from the Warring States time much earlier than the injection of Buddhism into China, which gives you insight into those foundations that existed when this cross-cultural sort of exchange began. Yulia asked me something in the text, and I'm going to take advantage of having just 5 more minutes as host, about next translations. I am completely at Jason's disposal. What he decides he wants to tackle, I am absolutely here for. I eat that loss. I invest in that loss. But if I had my druthers and I could pick one thing, I would love to tackle Journey to the West, because no Chinese text that I can think of synthesizes those different schools of thought quite as well, even though it lands very heavily in the Buddhist column, but it lambasted at the same time. There's a scene of monkey peeing on the Buddha's finger in his own protest. And so nobody gets away untouched from the author's sort of breakdown of all these, sacrosanct institutions in ancient China. I think Journey to the West is a great text, and unfortunately it's considered Shaoshu, or small writing. Fiction was not well treated well in much of ancient China, even through pretty much the Ming Dynasty. Fiction was still seen as lesser text or small words, shaoshua, small words. So
yeah,
that would be
all the scholars read them.
Yeah, everybody did. It's like that salacious, horrible movie, series that everyone's talking about, but I wouldn't have seen it. And did you know what they did in the Red Wedding? Thank you all. I'm not going to keep this open all night because I too have to run. I love seeing everyone here. I love the feedback. I'm getting better at taking the notes, and they're going to be in this compilation when we do finally get this anthology done. Then we're going to try and publish it. So I wish us luck and keep giving us good critiques. It just makes us better translators. Thank you all. I will see you all next week. It's great to be back.
Thanks, man.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you.
Thank you.
Man manzo, everyone.